afternoon, evening, YouTubers around the world, across the nation and around the world. Diamond's Log, Arc Date 2015-1-17. I'm going to read the second part, Chapter 2 of my book, How to Get Out of Babylon. Alrighty. Section 2. How should we then be living? We need to get back to the land and be caretakers of the garden. Adam and Eve were given the charge to take care of the garden, to take care of the earth. In fact, the series of commands to be fruitful, to, quote, be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, take dominion, and subdue it, end quote, is 5 things, and they're not all saying the same thing. They're not all saying, be fruitful and multiply, have many, many children. The, quote-unquote, replenish the earth part, I believe, at least in part, is to take care of the earth, to take care of the garden, to be caretakers, to tend it, to replenish and renew the soil. We would be blessed much more by replenishing the earth instead of poisoning and toxic waste dumping and strip mining and clear cutting it, all of which are far too prevalent. I know that I may sound like a liberal, I'm not honest, but we do need to take care of the earth. When man sins, nature suffers, was a dictum laid down by a memorable speaker I once heard back in my college days. Consider that in the book of Revelation, many of the judgments that are going to come are earth-oriented judgments. In other words, earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis, pestilence, famine, and drought. Now, if we are living close to the earth and growing our wealth from the ground and raising livestock and caretaking the earth as we are commanded to by our Creator, and replenishing the soil, replenishing the earth, might it be possible that we be spared a great amount of judgment? Where should we consider living? Certainly I would hope that to be the case if we are in an area of refuge. It says in Isaiah 4, verse 5, that, quote, the Lord will create upon every dwelling place of Mount Zion and upon her assemblies a cloud and smoke by day and the shining of a flaming fire by night. For upon all the glory shall be a defense, and there shall be a tabernacle for a shadow in the daytime from the heat, and for the place of refuge, and for a covert from storm and from rain. End of quote. So I believe that there are going to be different areas of the country, perhaps western Washington, central Idaho, up in Michigan, Kentucky, Tennessee, and perhaps many others. But I do believe that some of those, or all, are going to be temporary. I don't know. It's just conjecture on my part. I am very clear, however, that the area of the central United States is now, and will be, one of the best places in the world to be. This would be based upon the Christian Patriot Civil Defense Association, which held that from Scottsbluff, Nebraska, to Lubbock, Texas, to Atlanta, Georgia, to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, would be the area to gather to, and how big the safe area, quote-unquote, ended up being would depend on how many good people gathered there before the breakdown. I also saw that in George Washington's vision at Valley Forge, when he foresees a last days invasion of America by many nations, states clearly that those who survived would be driven to the center of the country. A heavenly host army would help them. The heavenly host in history. On December 16, 1838, a group of 464 South African voortrekkers, when attacked by 15,000 Zulus who were allegedly aided by a heavenly host. Similarly, the British in World War II, when the Luftwaffe was coming over to bomb London for the last time and there were no fighters left, watched the hordes of enemy planes turn around and go home. Later, when asked, German pilots said that there were hundreds and hundreds of white planes in the air and they were terrified of being annihilated, and so they turned around and flew back to Germany. And the Voortrekker story, I'm just going to make a brief interjection here. The same story applied there. After repulsing several attacks, they were out of ammunition, they were going to be overrun, and then when natives fled, and later they said that there were 7-foot white warriors that they knew they could not, fight or stand up against. They didn't have the courage. And so that is the scenario in George Washington's vision. There will be a heavenly host coming to the aid of the inhabitants, or the good people of the land, that were driven to the interior. So I believe there will be areas of refuge, and certainly the interior of the land, quote unquote, being one of them, if not the main one. To uncover all the facts and topics relevant here would take a couple of 100 pages. In brief, I believe that an area with Springfield, Missouri as its center will be the safest place to be in the next few years. How large that area turns out to be will depend on how many good people gather there. This is based on a multitude of reasons, such as soil, growing season, wood availability for heating and building, being near like-minded folk, lack of building codes, and above all, water. Corrie ten Boom, Ten Boom's vision. Corrie ten Boom, author of In My Father's House, was in a concentration camp during World War II. Years later, while on a plane flight over the Midwest, she said that she had a vision of a circular area, mostly in Missouri, with a wall of fire around it. Inside, everything was green and lush. Children were playing, cattle were grazing, crops were growing. Outside, there was desolation, anarchy, chaos, death, destruction, pestilence, famine, and drought. She also allegedly had a vision of the area being surrounded by angels with drawn swords, 5 ranks deep. So she moved to northern Arkansas, Eureka Springs, and lived out her days there. The only source for this is from Charles Jennings, who has a website called truthinhistory.com. Any others would be appreciated. And I have a footnote on that, and I don't see it. Basically, the story would, might apply to somebody else. It might have been of somebody else, but there's give and take on that, yes and no's, and not going to go into it. Civil War II. One more comment on America is a recommendation to read Civil War II by Tom Chittum. This book has a single theme. America has become a multinational empire, and all such empires degenerate into civil war. In relation to the rectangular area described above, this scenario whittles the central safe area down by hundreds of miles on the southeast, New Mexico, and I am not talking about the state, but rather Aztlan, and the plan of San Diego, quote-unquote, to kill every white male over the age of 16. And on the southeast, because of the overwhelming numerical superiority of the black population and other races. In spite of attending innumerable patriot, prophecy, and other meetings and watching hundreds of alarmist videos, this book was one of the most sobering and chilling yet factual and realistic books I have ever read in my life. This includes close to 100 science fiction and fantasy doomsday books. The Land of the People of Israel. The most powerful and telling description of America as having a prominent place in a last days scenario comes from Scripture itself. In the 38th and 39th chapters of Ezekiel. For a full analysis of this position, please read the works by F.E. Pitts, which are available online at several sites. A brief summary of his position is at childrenofyahweh.com/compare, COMPARET/new doctrine.htm. He has the distinction of preaching these ideas twice before the United States Congress at their invitation. In brief, let it be pointed out that not one of the descriptions of the, quote, land of the people of Israel, end quote, is a description of Palestine, or of the people who presently occupy it, who used the name Jew and incorrectly named their country Israel. Why did they not name it Judah, if they're Jewish? Every single description fits America exactly. Many of them fit only America of all the nations on earth in all of history. Where should we not consider living? Many Christians, many people, Christians included, have been convinced that America is going down, that they must go to some other country, such as Belize or Canada. The motivation is fear, mongered by newsletter writers such as Don McElvaney and others. Many are convinced to buy gold, and do. Ezekiel 7:15 and following states that silver and gold will be thrown into the street. They will be worthless. Fear is not a bad motivator if God gives it. Noah, moved with fear, built an ark. If it is fear that only wants to save one's own life, it is not good, it is selfish. The desire to own gold may not be wrong, but again, it can be only greed with a fine veneer. In light of the passage in Ezekiel, both motivators in this point in time are wrong. They are ungodly greed and ungodly fear. They will, in most cases, lead to destruction. One family I know may move to Hawaii. Now let's see. Living on a military target with a big black X on it is not my idea of intelligence, if you're a prepper. It is also on the top of a huge volcano, actually 5 volcanoes, susceptible to the ring of fire of the Pacific. In addition, it is not a survivable place, being subject to major earth and water catastrophes. One absolute fact must be considered before a major move like this one already mentioned. Life is not going to continue as it is now. Countries are changing. War is inevitable. Canada once had 3 million landmines to prevent Russia from crossing the country. They are gone, thanks in large part to Princess Diana's crusade against them. Handguns are essentially illegal. Canada is a highway to America for Russia and any part of Canada that the Russians decide is a nice place to occupy and farm. And those places will be pacified. Pacify in military jargon means to, quote, terminate with extreme prejudice, end quote, all living opposition, something the Russian Spetsnaz as well as the regular army are experts at. Before going there, I would suggest one learn Russian now. It's not too hard to pick up. Further, if one looks at a map of the Great Lakes region and northward, it will not take a rocket scientist to figure out that what land is there is an enormous mass of nearly submerged islands. I posit that in the near future, with chunks of Antarctica the size of Rhode Island falling off and Greenland melting away, that nearly all of the area which looks like it is an ocean with lots of islands will be an ocean with no islands. It is entirely conceivable that from Hudson Bay to the Gulf of Mexico could become a several 100-mile wide waterway. The point is that coastal areas, whether due to a gradual rise of the ocean level or a catastrophic event on the low side, like Katrina, and on the high side of an asteroid strike, like Lucifer's Hammer, an extinction level event, would not seem to be safe places to plan on surviving in. Okay? The coast is toast. Okay. So I think I will just end that so it doesn't get too bogged down. Yeah, I don't know where my videos are going. Alright, anyway, this is Jerry Diamond. If you're listening to this, you are the remnant.